Okay, now let's try to put things together and combine theory and practice. By now, hopefully, you have already watched video practice number 1 and video practice number 2 and completed the table and have completed the table with your ideas and beliefs about what pedagogy is, what teaching is, and what technology is, and how these beliefs shape your design of activities and the classroom work in relation to language-based classroom situations, teaching situations, and science-related teaching situations. But now let's focus on what is happening in the first video, in video practice 1. And later we will move on with video practice 2 and discuss the teacher's thinking and how this teacher's thinking links with practice, with what we have been watching in the videos, what are the principles underlying the practice. In video practice 1 is an example of technological application in classroom practice, and more particularly this video comes from a project where digital technologies were integrated, were used for digital storytelling and the retelling of an ancient Greek myth in a classroom of 12-year-old students in northern Greece. Well, it is obvious that this teacher's beliefs are shaped by the goals of the curriculum. Of course, she has to do some history classes and she has to teach this specific object of study, this specific phenomenon. But it's also clear that she doesn't think that history is mere simple enumeration of dates and events. She doesn't think that history should be a memorization of historical events and names and dates. Therefore, she is using classroom techniques to allow her students get to the knowledge of the myth, not only cognitively, but also in a way that use their bodies. They work together and practice certain linguistic phenomena and ideas from the object of study in order to develop further, to construct knowledge and develop and grow further through group work. It is also clear that the use of technology in this classroom is not only for setting questions and answering questions. We know already through our experience so far that the use of the social media, the development and the application of social media in so many domains of daily life, that it is not enough to look at technologies like a simple ask and answer machine. And in this case, our teacher doesn't do that. She also looks at technology as a way for their students to document their classroom activities. This is important because the students can watch what they have filmed later so that they can improve the scenes of their stories. They can improve their stories from a language point of view, from a content point of view, and from a performance point of view. So the pedagogical metaphor that comes up here is a living metaphor, is a novel metaphor of pedagogy, where students act not only by sitting down and listening to the teacher's lecture about the historical event or the myth, but they're using their imagination and put their ideas in action and test their ideas through the collaborative work activity. What's the role of the teacher? The role of the teacher here is not just sitting in the center and playing the sage, playing the wise person who has all the answers of the world for her students. On the contrary, she goes around the group and she asks leading questions, and despite the fact that the students seem to be getting distracted at some point, the teacher does not pay attention to that, but she goes on acting as a role model herself at some moment, at some point, in order to get the activity going. This is an example that shows that collaborative work and working together is not an easy job for the teacher. There might be some need to go around to different groups, of course. That requires more energy, but it also gives more choices to the student. It is also more inclusive, because in this way students that are more interested in technology can participate by filming the scene, by shooting the scene, and students who have more needs to practice some language areas, some linguistic phenomena can participate, or some students who are more interested in writing than using the technology can participate. So there is a lot of work for everyone. At the same time, while different students may be doing different things, everyone is involved and everyone is motivated. It's given the motive and the desire to participate grows, and not only grows but also is sustained to go on participating and to go on being active and playing a role in the classroom activity. We will talk more about this classroom in our future lessons, in our future sessions. Now, about the second video practice. This is from a science-related classroom event, where the students' task was to create digital stories, to use digital technologies again to produce digital stories about recycling. And in this way they were actually using science-related vocabulary. And not only that, they took the initiative and they got into filming the story to show to their peers online, their international peers online, and to this effect, to this purpose, they chose to use English. English are not their mother language. Actually, these are Finnish students, 12-year-old Finnish students, who prefer to use English to express themselves. That was a very, very demanding task, because making a story and addressing international peers in a language that is not your own, it's a second language, it's a foreign language, is very demanding. It requires a lot of practice, a lot of design, writing a scenario, asking for help, for improvements and corrections and revisions. It requires to use your imagination to create the whole story, what kind of recycling, and how to set the scenery for this one. So it's not only the content, the object of study. It's not only the science that they practiced here. The students actually practiced, again like in the previous situation, a whole lot of different ways to reach to the final purpose, which was to improve their knowledge of the content, but through a variety of ways. They had the choice. So these are ways that metaphors that innovate pedagogy can come up through practices and through classroom events that innovate, add new ways to how we view the classroom event. The classroom event as action, where both us, teachers, tutors, educators, take an active part, but also our students. And in this way, a participatory culture is shaped, is formed by having the opportunity to take on a role that fits us better, so that we develop both cognitively but also holistically in this way. So it's an opportunity not only for the students. We will see later why this is also an opportunity for us professionals to develop further our professional agency. Well, let's go back to the video practices again, and let's compare the two teaching styles. Both teachers, although they're so different in terms of their backgrounds, the teacher in the first classroom is from Greece, and the teacher in the second classroom, the science-related project, is from Finland. The first teacher is female, the second teacher is male. Different ways of thinking, different ways of reactions and decisions. However, there are some universal approaches to their teaching in terms of assigning work to the students, that kind of work to the students that gives them the opportunity to act, to plan, to think, to negotiate. In this sense, both of their teachers look at their teaching not only in terms of content knowledge, but they also incorporate pedagogical knowledge into the classroom event. In this way, the classroom event becomes an event. It doesn't really remain a fragmented piece of schooling that moves from one bell ring to the second bell ring, where the students are looking at their watches or their cell phones and see when the next break comes. Still, the break is important, but also classroom time is important because it is also time for them to talk, for them to produce, for them to decide. Yes, in this way, the classroom becomes an event that is part of a wider whole where the previous is related to what is happening in the present, and that is related to what is going to follow. In this way, the classroom events intertwine with one another, and they become a historical reality, because it matters what comes before. What comes before teaches us, we learn from that in order to change the present and in order to visualize a better future for education. Where what is happening in the classroom is relevant and meaningful for both the teacher and the student. So, taking all these into mind, let's go back to the concept of the classroom event. And let's look at it, let's conceptualize it as the space where the pedagogical thinking and the pedagogical action intersect, where these two notions meet and where they bear different ingredients, each one of them into the terrain of the learning space, learning environment, with purposes, with specific pedagogical purposes like the implementation of activities, like gaining experiences, like reflecting upon the process, like modifying things, modifying decisions and negotiating actions. And all this happened because something else happened before and something else follows. Therefore, what is happening in the event, in the classroom, somehow, it literally shapes the purposes of the next event. And then what is happening in the classroom comes up in a form of a narrative that has continuity, that is not only one piece, one fragment of the schooling experience. When the need of the student for holistic development is taken into account, the space of learning is where the young people interact and working together, like our young people in video 1 and video 2 did. And they did so in order to produce content, not only to consume what the teachers lectured in the room, in their efforts to transmit, to transfer the content knowledge about the object of study. Because both of these teachers acknowledged not only the need for the lecture, which they don't discard, they don't delete from their practices, but enrich their professional work with more communicative practices, like pair work does, and like group work does. Pair work and group work can have different objects, different objectives and different purposes. We are going to talk about this later. But let's stick to this one important principle now, that they allow the students produce oral speech, produce written speech, produce multimedia content, and in different ways. Some ways can be less controlled, some are more controlled, some are less free, some are more free and communicative. In all cases, the young people produce content. And think about this. Isn't it one characteristic, basic characteristic of the digital era to be able to produce content? And how do you do that? By articulating a voice, by expressing yourselves. Well, these students, mind you, are learning how to do that and how to cope with the requirements of the digital era, of the 21st century era, with the communicative requirements of every era, really.